Hi everyone, and welcome to part two of the Michael's reading. Uh, so we're going to be picking up from where we left off in part one. This reading's super short, so this will should hopefully be a short recording, and it'll be the last recording for the Michael's set reading. Just a reminder, in the first part of the reading, Michael's presents quite a graphic thought experiment where you and your friend are walking across the college campus. Your friend is tragically killed by a steamroller, which I guess rolls them from the feet first, leaving the brain intact. Um, and you die of shock from a stroke, and your friend's brain is put into your body, and then the question becomes, well, who wakes up? You know, is this a case of, well, it's the same body, and so therefore it's the same person? Is it a case of it's the same brain, and therefore it's the same person? Michaels discusses kind of the ins and outs of this, and she's really using this thought experiment to show that the particularly the memory basis uh, of identity, which is what Locke has argued, is flawed, because memory itself is fallible, but it's not really accurate to say that just because the person who's waking up in the bed has your friend Wanda's memories, that that person is now Wanda, because perhaps memory goes a little bit beyond just the brain structure. She talks about, the person waking up in the bed will remember learning how to ride a bike, and yet the legs that they have now never rode a bike. That kind of idea. So it seems like, can we really say that's the same identity? Michael's now is going to be shifting in this part of the reading to looking at what's called the same body theory. Put quite simply, you are the same as the person who I guess lived in or inhabited the physical body. So this is quite an old school identity theory. We'll hear Michael's right at the start reference Aristotle. So it goes all the way back to the ancient Greeks. It's kind of written off as a bit of a silly theory. Remember, Hume, change is change. And so even, the death of a single cell in your body means that your body is not the same as it was just a moment ago. Michaels is going to have a look at it, present us with a different thought experiment, and just to show that whilst a lot of people just write off the same body theory, there might be more to it than we think, and it might have more validity to it. It's worth noting before we start on the reading to keep in mind that Michaels isn't really offering her own perspective on personal identity here. What she's really pointing to is that the theory that a lot of people support, if they support a notion of a continued existence, which is really you are who you are consciously aware of, Locke's memory theory of personal identity, is not as solid as a lot of people think. And on the flip side, the same body theory, which has kind of been written off as not a very good theory anymore, and not many people support it, is maybe not the complete loss that a lot of people consider it. Okay, so yeah, we'll get Michael's now considering the same body theory. I'm going from page 394. You should see that at the top left side of your page. We're just 2 lines down. Okay, so the start of the paragraph, it is at this point. Okay. It is at this point that philosophers begin to reconsider the Aristotelian position mentioned earlier, that self-identity is essentially bodily identity. If the body theory of personal identity is true, then the person lying in the bed at the health center is you, deluded into believing that you are Wanda. That is, Shwanda is self-identical to you. So, linking back to that first thought experiment, because it's your friend's brain, Wanda, who's been put into your body, it's actually you waking up, but you believe that you are now Wanda. You're deluded. Think about Locke's thought experiment of the prince and the cobbler here. So same body theory would argue that when the prince's consciousness wakes up in the body of a cobbler, it's not actually the prince. It's the cobbler deluded into believing that they are a prince. This seems a bit dismissive, but keep in mind this is how we treat people who behave in this way. When people, snap and start thinking of themselves as a different person. I know I referenced Nietzsche, losing it and believing that he was Socrates and Jesus and Napoleon at different times. We don't really believe that when people say it. Whether that's right or wrong, is up for debate, but we don't believe it when people talk this way. We look at them and we say, well, you still look like Nietzsche, or you still look like you, so I'm going to treat you like you're still that same person. You might wonder at this point whether there is any positive reasons for endorsing the body theory, or whether it is simply a place to which one retreats only in defeat. The following case is designed to persuade you that there is at least some plausibility to the body theory. Okay, so note here, Michaels is not suggesting that the same body theory is correct. She's not saying it's the best account of personal identity. What she's pointing out is there's more to it than people think. All right, let's get into another really weird Michaels thought experiment. Suppose that an evil scientist, Dr. Nefarious, I mean, how is this person going to turn out with a last name Nefarious? Okay, this poor doc never had a chance. Anyway, Dr. Nefarious has selected you as his prime subject for a horrible experiment. You are dragged into his office. He says, tomorrow at 5 o'clock, you will be subjected to the most terrible tortures. Your nails will be pulled out one by one. Rats will be caged around your head. Burning oil will drip slowly on your back. The remainder I leave as a surprise. Oh, how nice. Are you worried about what will happen to you at 5 o'clock tomorrow? If you have any sense, you are. You think of the excruciating pain and suffering you will undergo, and would surely do just about anything to avoid it. So here, relatively straightforward setup. Someone says, tomorrow at 5, I'm going to torture you brutally, and then leaves you alone. You're going to dwell on that. You're going to be thinking about it all day. Okay, you're going to worry. It's going to be everything. It's going to taint everything that you do for that day. And this is exactly the point that Michaels is making. Of course, you're going to be thinking about it because those tortures are going to be happening to you at 5 o'clock. And that's why you're worried. If I said to you tomorrow in, a far war-torn country, children are going to die, you might find that upsetting for a moment, but you're probably going to switch to watching YouTube or something like that very soon, forget all about it. Okay? When things aren't happening to us, we tend not to worry about it. When things are happening to us, we do worry about it. And so this is the point that Michaels wants you to focus on. Okay, you would be right, and it would be perfectly natural for you to worry about these things happening to you. Okay, but now Dr. Nefarious says, tomorrow at 4:55, so 5 minutes before, I will use my dememorizer to erase your memory of this conversation. Are you still anxious about what is going to happen to you at tomorrow at 5 o'clock? Surely you are. After all, the fact that you won't worry between 4:55 and 5 be anticipating. Oh, sorry. After all, the fact that you won't between 4:55 and 5 be anticipating your torture doesn't entail that the torture itself will be any less painful. When you forget that your calculus professor told the class there would be a test on Friday, you aren't thereby spared the experience of taking the test. In fact, in that case, the experience is made worse by your not having had the opportunity to anticipate it. So this second version is exactly the same as the first. You've been told earlier that 5 o'clock tomorrow you're going to be tortured. You're left to worry the entire time, and then at 4:55, Dr. Nefarious erases the memory of the conversation where he told you he was going to torture you. So for 5 minutes, you have no idea that you're going to be tortured. You go about your day as if it's any other day. As far as you know, you have had this conversation, and as you sit here right now listening to me, it's the 5 minutes before Dr. Nefarious tortures you. I know for some of you, actually listening to my recording is the torture, in which case Dr. Nefarious got you already. But again, Michaels is pointing out here, just because we would forget for a brief period of time doesn't mean that we're now not worried about it still. We know that this is going to come, and just because we forgot about something doesn't mean we are spared that experience. You know, the forgotten test, I think, is a good example. When you show up to school and someone says, "Hey, how did you go with that homework?" and you have that moment of, "Oh my God, homework." Um, just because you forgot doesn't mean that you're spared from having to do it or the consequences of not doing it. Okay. Um, Now, Dr. Nefarious says, tomorrow at 4:57, I will use my dememorizer to erase all of your memories. Okay, so this is the next level up. Okay, I'm going to erase all of your memories. You will lose all memory of childhood, everything in your life. Essentially, from Locke's perspective at least, we would be erasing you. Are you still anxious about what will happen tomorrow at 5? Isn't it natural to describe the situation as one in which you will undergo horrible torture, though you won't know who you are or why this is happening to you? You will still experience your fingernails being pulled out, your back being burned, your face being eaten up by rats. Surely those experiences are ones you would like to avoid. Okay, so Michael's here is saying, okay, I'm going to remove all sense of self from the perspective of someone like Locke. I'm going to remove all memory. I'm going to give you a blank slate. Your consciousness will be completely blank as of 4:57. Will you still worry now about what's going to happen to you? Well, yeah, because look at your fingernails. Uh, this is it's still going to be pulled out. And I should have saved that because Michaels uses it in the next paragraph. But um, this is still, it's still not nice to think about, even though you won't know who you are. The pain will still be very real. The torture will still be very real. Um, uh, and then finally, Dr. Nefarious says to you, tomorrow at 4:58, I am going to use my rememorizer to implant in your brain all of Ronald Reagan's memories. Now, why Michaels has chosen Ronald Reagan, I'm not entirely sure. Based on her writings, I wouldn't think she's a fan of his politics. Maybe she's a big fan of his cowboy movies. That's right. Ronald Reagan, before he was President of the United States, was an actor. But anyway, so as of 4:58 tomorrow evening, you're going to wake up and believe that you are Ronald Reagan. You'll have all of Ronald Reagan's memories. Now, the question remains, are you still worried? Okay. Though this may not please you for personal or political reasons, the relevant question remains this. Are you still worried about what is going to happen tomorrow at 5 o'clock? Isn't it again perfectly natural to describe the situation as one in which you will undergo horrible torture, all the while believing that you are Ronald Reagan? Do you not now remain concerned that you are Ronald Reagan? Do you not now remain concerned that you will experience excruciating pain and intolerable suffering? Look at your fingernails while you consider your answer to this question. So, as strange as it sounds, what Michaels is pointing out here is that your body is like your body's not just like this random vessel that your consciousness has been trapped in, and your consciousness is your true self, as if we could remove that from the body and you would lose nothing about yourself. The body has more power than that. when it comes to identity. You still identify your body as your body. And just because I'm going to believe that I am someone else for a period of time, that doesn't necessarily mean that the torture will be any less painful. I will still experience that. It's just that I will believe that I'm Ronald Reagan at the time. Okay, the memories that inhabit my mind or my consciousness um, do not change the pain that I will be going through. And so in this way, Michaels at least believes that yes, we would still be worried about what's going to happen at 5 o'clock, um, whether we believe we're Ronald Reagan or not. Um, if this sounds a little bit weird, I mean, try and think kind of more realistically about it. You know, with personal identity, we end up talking a lot about things like multiple personality disorder, or as it's known now, dissociative disorder. Um, if one, if I've got multiple personalities that inhabit my body, just because one of them was, driving my body, for lack of a better term, at a point doesn't mean that what they do doesn't affect the other personalities in any other way. So, think about it this way. One personality is, self-harms. Let's use this as an example. It doesn't mean that the pain that I've been put through by that other personality, is now minimized or anything like that because I've woken up in personality B. It's still there. That pain is still very real. The body still felt it. And so this is kind of what Michaels is pointing out with the Dr. Nefarious Ronald Reagan example. Just because you believe you're Ronald Reagan doesn't change the pain you're going to experience. There's a physical reality to identity that is inescapable. Your body is linked to who you are, and you experience your body as part of who you are. The good things that happen to it and the bad things that happen to it. So yeah, if you're struggling to keep up with the changes to the Dr. Nefarious same body theory, I've got it sort of summarized there on the screen in dot points for you. Hopefully, it helps you to kind of zone in on what's being discussed. All right, so now Michaels is going to sort of discuss the two theories that she's really looked at, which is same brain and same body, and talk about, well, neither of them are perfect. Neither of them really give a complete account of personal identity. And what that really means for personal identity is it's probably more complicated than we give it credit for. What this story demonstrates is not the conclusive superiority of the body theory over the memory or brain theory. So this is an important point. Remember this. Michaels is not saying that the same body theory is better than the same brain or the memory theory, but rather the importance of our bodies to our self-identity. This is something that tends to get lost in the traditional conceptions of personal identity. Furthermore, returning to the case of Schwander, we can now see that it is not altogether preposterous to argue that Schwander is indeed you, deluded into believing that she is Wanda. So when you wake up on the bed in excruciating pain, the fact that you've got all of Wanda's memories won't change the pain that's being experienced in your body. So, Michael's, as she said just then, but rather the importance of our bodies to our self-identity. Our bodies are the physical reality of ourself, and we can't just pretend that's not important at all. In other words, anyone who wishes to dismiss the possibility must also dismiss the possibility that the person who undergoes the torture is indeed you, deluded into believing that you are Ronald Reagan. Whilst it is true that we tend to identify ourselves with and by our thoughts, beliefs, inclinations, and feelings, our discussion of the body theory should remind us that there are reasons for believing that our bodies are, at the very least, important to who we are. Some philosophers would argue that our bodies are who we are, that self-identity is bodily identity. So that paragraph there, I think, gives you a good summary of what Michaels is attempting to show in this piece. The first thought experiment with Wanda Schwanda is designed to show you that the same brain theory or memory theory, as Locke sort of was a champion of, is maybe not as complete as we like to think it is, particularly when we argue that maybe memory goes beyond just the brain processes of memory. Can I say I remember riding a bike when the legs that I have now never rode a bike? Can I really say that it was me who rode that bike, the identity that I am now? I remember it, but my legs never experienced it. I mean, it feels like it's a step too far to say that it is the same me just purely because I remember it. Having said that, the same body theory has some validity, but it is not it is not complete in itself. We would be wrong to just say you are who you physically are at any given time, because this is far too simplistic and eliminates too much of what we actually see as being ourselves, our thoughts, our beliefs, all of that sort of mind stuff. In considering these admittedly fanciful problem cases, we have seen that we lack a concept of self-identity that allows us to predict when we would or wouldn't persist through time. This might suggest to us that our concept of self-identity is not an all or nothing one. So I think that's a really key idea that Michaels is presenting, that identity isn't all or nothing. So it's not purely consciousness or memory or the brain or the body. Like, to say that it is one of those things is too simplistic. To say that it is none of those things is also too simplistic. It's not all or nothing. Perhaps the best that we can say about personal identity is that it's extraordinarily complex. That in fact our concept is one which admits of degrees. If so, we are no longer talking about identity per se, which is an all or nothing concept, but rather about some other relation of psychological and physical connectedness. Now, what Michaels is talking about here is maybe the problem is the baggage that comes along with a word like identity. Maybe we need to relax our definition of what personal identity is, and that this needs to, as she puts it, admit of degrees. We'd all identify that there are different things that make up who we are. Maybe that's how we need to really see identity, that there are different things who make up who we are, and that just because one of those things might not be present, doesn't mean we're not the same as we were before. But I would be wrong to say that we're exactly the same as we were before. Maybe we need to relax this definition of identity. Maybe we'll never get a precise answer to personal identity. Who are you? Well, that might never be a precise image. It might always be a bit blurry. Nevertheless, we can now see first that the answer to the question, who ought to pay Schwanda's tuition, will depend upon which theory of personal identity we are inclined to endorse, and second, that the answer may not be as clear and unequivocal as we would like it to be. So, quick one there from Michaels. Remember, she's not really offering a perspective on personal identity herself. She's simply pointing out that the same brain theory, and particularly memory theory of identity, is maybe a little bit more flawed than what Locke and other supporters of it would have you believe. And that same body theory probably has more to it than a lot of people suggest. Same body theory really grounds identity theory in the physical reality of what identity is. A lot of people write off same body theory as just being third person identity, or it's the way that the world sees you. Well, not really. It's the way that you experience the world, and surely that makes up who you are. The experiences we have are generally seen to be an integral part of our identity. Um, Now, most people just link that to memory, but surely there's some sort of link to the body that experienced those things. So, hope you've enjoyed. If you've got any questions, chuck them in the comments. Like and subscribe as always. This is the last reading for personal identity and the last reading for Unit 3, philosophy as well. I'll see you in the good life next unit. Okay? Take care of yourselves. Have fun. Bye.